and welcome to Wild Woman. My name is Mary, and I'm on a journey of spiritual and creative recovery. I have a big announcement to make. Starting in August, I am starting a yoga teacher training program, and so I've registered, paid my tuition, and I even got a t-shirt. So I'm pretty excited about that, and today I want to bring you a video on how I made that decision to start that process. And to be honest with you, I think it took me too long. It took me almost a year to make the decision to enroll in this class. And honestly, it probably should have only taken a few months. And so part of the spiritual and creative recovery process has been an effort to get myself unstuck out of this rut. And the longer you're in a rut, the deeper that rut gets and the harder it is to get out. So don't do what I did. And my first tip for you is to don't overthink and don't wait too long to start making decisions about your life, because the longer you stay where you are, the harder it is to get unstuck. So here's my process. My first process was just starting with journaling, just thinking through. And for me, I tend to overthink things. And so journaling is a way for me to get all of my thoughts out of my head onto paper. And that stops that mental loop, because I tend to loop the same thoughts over and over again. But getting them out on paper seems to help get that loop unstuck. So I started with journaling. And one of the first things that I did is I actually made a list, a very long list of all of the different possible job and career options. And I went back all the way to my childhood, anything that I had ever thought of doing when I was a kid, any of the aspirations that I may have had as a teenager or a young adult. And even now, I just thought about all of the different possible jobs and careers that appeal to me. And it doesn't have to be realistic at this point. So if you were a kid and you maybe, when I was a kid, maybe if I thought about being a ballerina or an astronaut or a police officer, I included all of those kinds of things in my list. And even though I'm a middle-aged woman and being a ballerina maybe isn't a realistic career option for me. That's more of a young woman's game. But I included it because it tells me something about what I'm attracted to and what I have an affinity towards. And so I just wrote down, I think it was 2 or 3 pages of all of these different career and job opportunities that I thought I might enjoy. Realistic or not, go ahead and include it. Just make the list as long as you want and just brainstorm and write all of it down. And then what I did is I started to categorize all of those different things. So what does writer and poet and artist, and what do all of those things have in common? Well, those are all creative things. And what do ballerina and yoga teacher and gymnast all have in common? Well, those are all physical things that involve body movement. And what do being a park ranger and being a naturalist and being owning and operating a campgrounds? Well, those are all outdoor things, and people that know me know I love hiking and backpacking and outdoor sports. And so I had a whole category just for outdoor sports, and I had a whole category for creative, and I had a whole category for like teaching, different things that related to teaching. Not like I want to go into schools and start teaching in a school, but I had things like teaching, being a director of Christian education and things like that I included in the category of teaching. And so I had all of these different categories, and I started pulling at those threads and seeing what all of these different things have in common. And maybe if astronaut was something that you wanted to be when you were a little kid, and that may not be a realistic option for you now, but what was it that being an astronaut that really attracted you? Was it the idea of adventure and going on a great adventure? Or was it the idea of, were you really into astronomy as a kid? Did you get that, your very first telescope, and you looked through that telescope up at the moon in full clear clarity, and you said, yes, someday I'm going to go to the moon? So what was it about being an astronaut that originally attracted you? Because that's going to tell you something about yourself. Even if that's not a realistic option, at this point, leave it in that list and go ahead and include that. So you may have an entire category around astronomy, if that was something that originally appealed to you even when you were a kid. Keep that in mind. So making this huge list and then grouping things together in categories, and some things may go cross category. So For example, being a yoga teacher is both in that physical fitness and body movement category as well as the teaching category, which, as we're going to discover, is kind of how I came to that conclusion of something that I wanted to do. So I have this huge list. I have it categorized in different threads, different connections, and pulling at those threads and identifying those connections and what is it about those careers and job options that truly appeal to you. Set that aside just for now, and then focus on yourself. So looking into yourself, looking at your own natural talents, your spiritual gifts, and your skills. And I looked back all the way from my childhood on, all of the jobs that I've ever had. What skills did I develop during those jobs? Whether it was a job that you liked or not, there may have been something about that job, even if you didn't like the job in its totality, was there something there that you did enjoy? And if it was a job that you did enjoy, what were the things that made you love it so much? So an example from my own experience was when I was in college, during the school year, I worked at the food court in the student center, and I worked in fast food. And so I didn't love that job, but one thing I was good at was making tacos. I could make a 6-pack of tacos in under a minute. That's one of my skills. I don't know how that plays into my other career options, but it's something I thought about. And the other job that I had when I was in college, in my summers off, I worked at a summer camp. What was it that I loved about working at a summer camp? I loved being outdoors. I was working as a lifeguard, so I was working at the pool, and I was teaching swimming lessons every day. And that was one of my favorite parts of the job. And working with children and being a part of their summer. And I loved that summer camp experience. It was awesome. So I thought about all the different skills and what I really liked about that job. Being a lifeguard, being a middle-aged woman, I'm not going to go back to being a lifeguard, but there were things, for example, teaching swimming lessons, that I really enjoyed about that job, that skill and that talent for teaching is something that I've continued with in my current life. So I thought through all the different jobs and even volunteer opportunities that I've had in my life. So I've been a Sunday school teacher. I've been a facilitator for Bible studies for adults. And so that really led me towards a direction, again, of thinking of Sunday school teaching, small group leader, Bible study facilitator. All of those things had a common thread that, again, tied in with other aspects from other jobs. And so I started looking for those common threads of the past jobs that I've had, the things that I'm good at, my natural talents, and my spiritual gifts. Spiritual gifts are just gifts from God that allow you to do the service of God. And so career aptitude tests are something that you can find online. That might be a helpful tool for you. And a spiritual gifts inventory. And you might contact your pastor or your director of Christian education to get a spiritual gifts inventory. And I suggest doing one that's really comprehensive. 2 or 3 pages is too short because it's not going to cover all the different categories that there are of spiritual gifts. So a spiritual gifts inventory that's really broad and really encompassing and really thorough. So like 10 or 12 pages. I've done spiritual gifts inventories that were 10 or 12 pages, and they covered a really broad range of different kinds of spiritual gifts. And again, one of those spiritual gifts that kept coming through was teaching and prophecy and leadership. All of those things are indicators, key indicators at what I am gifted at, and the gifts that I have been given as a teacher, as a facilitator, as a leader. Those are going to play a key role in the things that I'm good at and the potential careers that I'm going to be good at. And so all of your natural talents, your spiritual gifts, your skills, think it through all of those different things. And I think back even to my childhood. I was a very active child, and I was in softball and basketball. And when I was in high school, I was in color guard. So what do all of those things have in common? I can't say that I was really an athletic child, but I was a very active child. All of those things have the one thing in common, that's body movement, moving through the body. And again, thinking back, if ballerina was on my list, what was it about being a ballerina that was really appealing to me? It was that movement and expression through bodily movement that was really appealing to me. So that's a hint, that's a clue. So Once you have this huge long list of all the different careers and job options that you might have thought of, categorized, think about all your different skills, talents, and spiritual gifts, and then start drawing connecting lines between the things that you're good at and the things that you think you might want to do. And then from there, you start to develop a more realistic list of options. So I kind of eliminated some of the things like astronaut and ballerina, but I pulled out from that list the things that are actual options, realistic options for me in my life. So I started to draw those connections from things that I think I might like to do, things that I think I'm good at, things that I could actually do. And I sort of had a list of about 10 or 12 things. So you don't want a list that's too long because that's too many different things to think about. You don't want a list that's too short because then you're really limiting yourself. But I made a list of about 10 or 12 different realistic job opportunities or career tracks that I could actually do. And things that I thought I would actually be good at. And then I kind of journaled out each one of those things separately. And I got a pretty quick feeling of how enthusiastic I was about each of those different options based on those journal entries. Some of the journal entries were not even a page. Some of them were 3 or 4 pages. And so I could instantly see pretty quickly which of those things I felt really passionate about and I was really interested in looking at. And so I kind of narrowed that down even further, and I got down to about 6 things. And that's when I really got into the nuts and bolts of it. And I started researching those 6 things. What educational requirements am I going to need? What training am I going to need? How is it going to be something that's expensive to start up? How quickly can I get started in this? What kind of background do I need? What kind of education do I need? And so I really started looking at the nuts and bolts. I started looking at if I wanted to start a business, what kind of financial investment am I going to need? And how long is it going to take me to get a new business up off the ground and start making money off of it? Is this something I can realistically do? And some of the things that I was thinking about might have been things that would have required going back to school and getting a master's degree. And those things I really had to hit pause and think about the realistic financial and time investment in getting a master's degree. Because that's going to impact my family. It's going to impact my financial well-being. And so I'm not discouraging anybody from thinking about careers where you might have to go back to school and get a degree, but hit pause on those and really think those through. And you might even discuss those with your spouse, with your family, because it's a big financial investment and it's a big time investment. And so for me, I didn't feel like I was that passionate about going back to school and getting a master's degree. And I really didn't want to spend the time and the financial investment to do that if I wasn't like fully committed to that particular career path. And so I kind of just eliminated those things. And for you, if those things are in your final list, you really got to think about how you're going to attain that, because it is going back to school and getting a degree is a big financial and time investment. And you got to work out how that's going to work with your current life. Can you continue to work full time and go to school? How long is it going to take you to finish a degree, part-time or full-time, taking a couple of classes at a time, doing it online, going to a university? Is this something you're going to have to relocate to do? Is this something you can do from home or online? So it's really a big consideration. And even I think almost all of the things that I had considered doing had at least some requirement of education that I didn't have. And so in the case of becoming a yoga teacher, I have to complete a yoga teacher certification. It's a certification course. I had a couple of things that would require certification, but a certification course is certainly less expensive and less of a time investment than a master's degree, for example. So I felt like that was more of a doable goal for me, is to do something that was a certificate requirement. So I kind of looked at the nuts and bolts of how much it was going to cost money and time-wise, how long it was going to take to get this education requirement under my belt, and how quickly could I get started in the career of my choice, because I've been stuck for so long that I'm really anxious to get going in a new direction. And so the nuts and bolts and how much I started looking at job websites, job listing websites, and looking at job listings that are in that particular field and looking at how much I might expect income wise. Um, and just looking at the different requirements, the daily tasks of those jobs, and really looking at the nuts and bolts of it. And that narrowed it down to about 4. I had my top 4 choices once I really thought through the mechanical nuts and bolts of it. And then I kind of had this heart. I had 4 things that I really felt like I could do. They're really realistic. And what I ended up doing is I set up this space, a physical space, and I had physical objects that represented each of the 4 careers that I was thinking about. And I held those objects in my hand, and I pictured myself using that thing. I tried to get a really clear image in my head of what am I wearing and what's the environment that I'm working in? What am I doing on a day-to-day basis? What's my day-to-day routine look like? And can I really picture myself doing this thing? And so I even went through this process of experimenting a little bit with doing each of those careers and visiting people who were in those careers and really trying to focus through how am I going to really function in this new career opportunity. And so that was somewhat more of an intuitive. Everything up to this point had been in the head, intellectual, writing it out, journaling, nuts and bolts, income and expense. When I got to my final 4, it was more of an intuitive feeling, trying to picture myself doing that thing and how did I feel. And that's where I went back to the journaling again, journaling out my feelings about each of these different things and how does it make me feel to actually be in that career doing that thing day to day, which is hard to predict, but to the best of my ability. And I ultimately ended up on a yoga teacher. And because that was just the thing that I felt the most passionate about, it was the thing that really seemed to hit most of the big categories that I had originally started out with. My original list of categories hit yoga teacher in several different spots. So I really felt like that this process really helped me get through it. And the biggest challenge that I had was figuring out this process to begin with. And so I hope that you can take these tips and these steps if you're feeling stuck and if you feel like you need a new career, maybe even a new side hustle or a new life path. These are the steps that I took. And so you can try that out for yourself, whether those steps work for you or not. So if you have ever made a major life-changing decision and you want to share in the comments the path, some of the tips, some of the things that helped you make that decision, I would welcome your input and your thoughts. Other tips that you might consider besides just journaling is taking a break from your current job. If you can spare the vacation time and you can spare the time away from your family, maybe taking a spiritual retreat to process through some of those things. Setting aside time, if you can't do this like a concentrated week-long spiritual retreat, maybe setting aside time every day to think through each of these different steps and to work on journaling through each of these different steps. And just making the decision to get started for me was the hardest and most important step. I've got to make a change in my life. I've got to do something new. I feel like I'm stuck. I feel like I'm in a rut. I've got to make a decision and I've got to get out and do something new. Just making that first step was so important for me and really set me down this path. And I kept getting stuck throughout each of those steps. So I really encourage you to set aside time in your life to actually work on this, because I'm an overthinker. So getting through those mental blocks was really important for me. So if you're thinking about making a change in your life, I hope that this video is helpful to you. Thanks for watching. And my next video is going to be about how to plan a spiritual retreat. I've actually got a personal retreat coming up here in about a week. And so I've been thinking through how I'm going to structure that week. And I'll share that video with you hopefully real soon. So until next time, guys, thanks for watching. Have a great week. I'll see you next time.